Sean, hope you're okay. It's time for another chapter of Wizard in My Shed by Simon Farnaby, illustrated by Claire Powell and read with the kind permission of Hodder Publishers. And in the last chapter, Merdyn is fairly convinced that he's seen a poster or a picture of Jerobo in London, his arch enemy. And Rose has tried to explain to him that it is a poster of someone who's won Britain's Got Talented People. But Merdyn is a little bit confused, and he's decided that the only way that he can sort this out is to get hold of Thundarian, his staff. So Rose has worked out that she thinks it may be in the well in the shopping centre, which is where Merdyn appeared in the first place. So this chapter is called Cunning, Ploys and Top Boys. The next day, Rose gave Merdyn strict instructions to meet her at the church, not the school. Then she put Bubbles in her backpack with some hay and food pellets. She detached the pine cone to his collar so that he could speak whenever he wanted. It was too big to hang underneath his collar, so Rose tied it on top and stuck it up like a Mohican or a Cherokee headdress. Bubbles thought a guinea pig in a pine cone headdress looked ridiculous. "That's the price you pay for being able to talk, I'm afraid," Rose told Bubbles with a shrug as they walked to school together. "Speaking of which, don't talk to anyone. The world isn't ready for a chatting guinea pig. Besides, we can't share Merdyn's secret yet. I don't want him giving away my singing spell to anyone else." "I don't get it," Bubbles groaned, squeezing another poo from his bottom. "First you want me to talk, then you don't, then you do, then you don't. I'm getting mixed messages here, Rose." "Be quiet," Rose hissed. "Stop pooing in my bag." As luck would have it, the cats were passing just at that moment, and it looked to them like Rose was talking to herself or to her school bag, and Rose wasn't sure which was worse. "Weirdo," sneered Tamsin. By the end of the day, Bubbles had done approximately 37 poos and 10 wees in Rose's bag. She vowed she would never bring him to school again. After school, the meeting with Merdyn didn't go quite to plan either, of course. Granted, he hadn't turned up at school, which was an improvement on yesterday, but he was an hour late. Apparently, it was because it was cloudy and he couldn't see the sun properly to tell the time. Rose pointed out that this proved maybe not everything was better in the Dark Ages. Once inside the shopping centre, they took up a position behind the Donuts R Us stand and observed the ornamental garden beyond. Merdyn recognised the place at once. This was where he'd arrived through the rivers of time 2 days earlier. And sure enough, there was the old well, exactly as it had been 1,500 years ago, barring a few missing stones and all the plastic flowers. It was only 30 feet from where he'd found himself. He could have got Thundarian from the well there and then, had it not been for the guards. No sooner had Merdyn thought these thoughts than the guards themselves, named Jim and Alan, if you recall, marched into view. They were stalking the perimeter of the ornamental garden like a couple of panthers, eager not to get caught again. "We have a problem," said Merdyn to Rose. "Those two guards. When I did landeth here the other day, well, I may have attacked them a shrew." "What?" "In self-defence, I might add. I was confused. I did not know I had landed in the future," said Merdyn, his tone turning melancholy. "This was once a beautiful forest, full of great pines and oaks, the most magnificent herbs and plant life. Now look at it, a gaudy monstrosity. 'Tis enough to make a person weep. Anyway, as soon as they clappeth eyes on me, they will try to retain me again, I have no doubt." Rose racked her brains for a solution. Her eyes, quite by chance, rested on the top boy shop where Chris worked. He should be on shift right now, she remembered. Then another genius idea grew in her cranium, and she dragged Merdyn into the men's fashion store. Chris was leaning against the cash register, flirting with his co-worker, Shakia. Chris had fancied Shakia for ages. She had curly afro hair and a nose ring, which was absolutely the very height of cool in Chris's mind. Suddenly Chris saw Rose and Merdyn coming across the shop floor towards him. The shock caused his elbow to slip off the cash register, sending his body crashing to the ground like a character in a cartoon. "You're right," said Shakia, picking him up off the floor. Chris tried to style it out. "Oh, yeah, I dropped a 50p. I was looking for it, that's all. I'll just go see these customers." And with that, he hurriedly made his way over to his sister. Rose saw Chris coming and waved enthusiastically. "Don't wave at me," her brother snapped. "What are you doing here? I thought we had a deal. No meetings in public spaces." "Chris, shut up. We need your help." Her brother looked round anxiously. Shakia was staring at him, her face a portrait of curiosity. Chris smiled in return, then spun back to his sister. Certainly, madam, he said loudly with a false grin in Rose's direction. The changing rooms are this way if you'd like to follow me. He ushered Merdyn and Rose across the shop floor and into a cubicle. What do you want? He hissed now. I could get fired for having him in here. This is a fashion store for fashionable men. Uncle Martin drinks from toilets and he stinks. No offence, Uncle Martin. None taken, replied Merdyn, and he meant it too. A powerful aroma was seen as a good thing in the Dark Ages. Rose grabbed her brother by the shoulders and looked into his eyes. He was her big brother and it was time to be honest with him. Surely he would come through for her in her hour of greatest need. Chris, listen to me very carefully, she said. This man is not Uncle Martin. He is actually a wizard. Warlock! Shouted Merdyn for the 20th time since arriving. Warlock, sorry. From the 6th century, and he needs a disguise so he can get his magic wand. Staff? Merdyn interjected again wearily. Staff, sorry. Will you stop interrupting, please? Said Rose. Get it right then, the Warlock snapped back. Chris's head bobbed back and forth between the bickering pair like he was watching a demented tennis match. He needs to get his staff from the old well, Rose went on trying again, so he can go back in time. But we need to get past the security guards first with a disguise provided by you. These guards and I, we have history, Merdyn said with a grimace. You're both insane, said Chris calmly. Please leave my shop, thank you. And he swished open the curtain of the changing room to let them out. Rose's shoulders slumped. Come on, Merdyn, she said with a sigh. Let's try something else. Merdyn didn't move. Instead, he fixed Chris with a knowing gaze and said, What if I could make her fall in love with thee? What? Who? Chris spluttered, his face turning a deep shade of pink. Why, the object of thy affections, said Merdyn, and gestured towards the girl at the cash register. Now Chris was interested. He ushered Rose and Merdyn back into the dressing room and shut the curtain once more. How? He said quickly. Why, a love potion, of course. 'Tis a simple recipe. Thou will find the ingredients in any forest or wood if there are any left in this god-forsaken place. Chris still looked sceptical. They were losing him again. Then Rose had an idea. He really can do magic. I'll show you, she said. She got Bubbles out of her backpack and held him up. Bubbles twitched his nose as if to say, I am not a performing monkey. But he didn't actually say it because he was really annoying. Bubbles, what is wrong with you? Rose screamed, exasperated. All right, Chris, you'll just have to trust me. Will you help us? She fixed him with a pleading look as only an annoying little sister can. Please! For once, just trust me on this, please! All right, said Chris finally. She'd better fall deep in love with me, like you hear about in songs and stuff. Oh, she will, replied Merdyn with great confidence. Chris smiled. Then it's time for a makeover. What's a makeover? Bubbles whispered to Rose after Chris had left to get some clothes. Shut up, I'm not talking to you. Rose huffed at her furry friend. But really, she was too excited to be annoyed. After all, what does a warlock look like after a makeover? 10 minutes later, Rose found out Merdyn was transformed. Chris had gone for a street look for the 6th century sorcerer. Gone were his flowing robes and pointy hat, replaced by skinny jeans, big trainers and a blue bomber jacket. On his head he wore a garish orange trucker's cap and huge wraparound sunglasses. Now Chris gathered Merdyn's matted hair in a bunch at the back of his head and tidied up his beard with a hair bobble, which made him look like he had a ponytail on his chin. What do you think? Said Chris, turning the Warlock to face the mirror. I don't know, said Merdyn. I cannot see a wretched thing in these absurd eyeglasses. Well, those guards won't recognise you, said Rose, and that's the main thing. Rose gathered Merdyn's old garments in a bag as she was sure he couldn't stay in those jeans for long. They looked very tight. Chris, however, was pretty pleased with Merdyn's look. I think this'll catch on, he said proudly. Suddenly, the curtain of the dressing room flung open, swoosh, and there stood Shakya. What are you up to, Chris? She said in a firm voice. We're not supposed to let homeless guys in here, and who's this? Shakya gestured towards Rose. That's my sister, said Chris reluctantly, and this is, Chris didn't know what to say about Merdyn. He felt he couldn't say Uncle Martin anymore. He's a friend of my sister. He needs our assistance, Rose said, helping her brother out. He just wants to get something that belongs to him that someone threw down an old well a long time ago. It was the best she could do without using the words wizard, warlock, wand, staff. Shakya eyed them suspiciously. Okay, she said after a pause, much to everyone's surprise. Who's paying for the threads? Chris hadn't actually thought about who would pay for Merdyn's clothes, and he wasn't usually the fastest thinker in the world, but on this occasion he managed to come up with something pretty quick. Me, he said with a nod, out of my work allowance. We all get an allowance, right? Spend on clothes? Well, I'll pay for these clothes out of mine. Shakya looked at him in astonishment, and so did Rose. You blew your entire allowance to help a friend of your sister? She asked. Chris nodded. Strictly speaking, it was to get Shakya to fall in love with him, but yeah, he'd blow his entire allowance to help a friend of his sister to help him. Then something amazing happened. Shakya hugged Chris. She actually hugged him, not in his dreams, but in real life. Dear reader, this was a momentous moment in Chris's short, anxious life. He'd never felt so ecstatic. His heart was pounding so hard he thought there was a mixed martial arts fight going on in his ribcage. He was sure Shakya would notice, but she didn't. Instead, she stopped hugging him, looked into his eyes and said softly, "Sorry, Chris." "That's okay," Chris said automatically before adding, "What for?" "I misjudged you. I thought you were just another bloke obsessed with hair and clothes and shallow stuff like that," said Shakya. "But I was wrong." Rose raised an eyebrow. No, she wasn't. That was exactly what Chris was really like, but she wasn't going to bring that up at this moment of accidental triumph. "Hey!" "That's okay, we're cool," Chris said, trying to hide his happiness. "All right then," said Shakya, turning to Merdyn. "Can I add too?" "'Tis not a dream, it would seem. Rose now has a fledgling team." And that's the end of chapter 13. Join me next time to find out what happens when they try to get Thundarian out of the well. Have a fab week. Bye-bye!